Hello and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Deshaun Vasquez.
And today we're talking Dune, baby. We're getting deep Dune. But before that, guys, we want to bring up that today's our 100th episode of the Warp Shelf podcast. And, of course, we want to thank you guys. We want to thank our listeners and for supporting the show. And I want to thank Deshaun for doing this show with me at all times. This is a lot of fun to do. And
yeah, I mean, it was a long time coming. And, like, the years were, like, Real Books on at Batman was gone. We had, like, every time we would talk or, like, meet up and stuff, we would always talk about, like, man, I miss doing the podcast.
Exactly. And it was one of those things that it's so nice to have it back that basically 100 episodes means almost 2 years of straight weekly podcasting.
Yeah.
So I love it. I enjoy doing it, and I hope you guys can like go back and like look through the content and find stuff you guys enjoy, you know, because that's why we do it weekly, is that like you guys have a plethora of things to go through, you know, like and I think today is one of the Dune is going to be an exciting one because obviously it's very easy contrast right here. Here's the pitch for today's episode. Deshaun's read the book. He's seen the shitty movie. He's seen the new movie. And me over here, I've never read this book that he gave me. I've never seen the David Lynch. I've never seen the 2000s TV show. I don't know if you did either.
No, but I've seen clips and I'm like, I'm good.
I'm good with that. And I think that it's one of those things that, so I've only seen HBO Max's or Warner Brothers, however you want to put it, Dune. And so we're coming in with the teacher.
Completely different perspectives.
Yeah, teacher leading the blind, you know, like is basically it. Deshaun's been telling me to watch and read Dune forever. And after watching Dune, I can see why. It's the number one thing. It's my number one first thought is I'm like, oh, Deshaun was right. I did like this.
Oh, again.
Yeah, if you guys weren't aware, Deshaun's right a lot about these recommendations. Not often does Deshaun recommend something to me, and I'm like, well, that was straight trash, Deshaun. What the fuck? I'm like, what the hell did you recommend this to me for? And it's Dune is a very surprising watch, so I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yeah. So my experience with it, before I had ever read the book, was I did see the David Lynch movie just because it was one of those like famous weird ass 80s movies, and didn't like it. Didn't really like it. Wasn't my thing. And then wouldn't read the book until years later. I got my big mass market paperback over here, which isn't nearly as nice as the one I got you.
Hey.
But this was part of a virtual book club that Comic Book Girl 19, aka now she goes by Danica XIX, did.
Yeah.
She even has her signature here, where she would like mail you a copy of the book. She made her own custom like bookmark of like the sandworm and stuff, which is a little too TNA for YouTube. But, like custom bookmarks and even a little tassel, which is
cool.
Oh,
that's awesome! What a cool concept.
Pin and stuff like that, and just you would read a certain amount of the book every week, and then she would do like a pre-recorded segment on Twitch discussing that passage, as well as having like a live like Q&A and like discussion through the Twitch chat. So it was fun. It was one of the things that like got me thinking about starting a book club with my friends on Discord, which I have now. So.
Yeah, that's nice. You know, like
and after like following Denis Villeneuve's career, like liking stuff like Sicario and Arrival, and him just fucking nailing the Blade Runner 2049 out of the park.
Yeah, if you fucking watch this show, you know that, and we did a whole episode on it, is that I don't like the original Blade Runner. I'm not a big fan. And then I watched Denis Villeneuve's because we're good friends. He's Denny to me, you know. You know how it be. But no, I'm just kidding. But he is so damn good that he made me be like, holy shit, do I like Blade Runner? Like, fuck. And I really fell in love with his Blade Runner 2049, and I've been after everything he's made ever since. And so that's what really sold me on this, is that, like, I've already wanted to see what David Lynch big blockbuster was. So I was always interested in seeing the original because, you know, David Lynch, it's like, it's so weird that he did Dune, you know? Like, it seems so strange.
It's interesting. It's weird that, like, in both instances, from like the David Lynch's version of the Dune to Blade Runner, from Blade Runner 2049 to this new iteration of Dune, there's always a weird causal link. I mean, to be fair, twice is not a pattern, but it's funny there have been two direct causal links between Dune and Blade Runner, because the reason we got Blade Runner was because of an unmade version of Dune we never got, in which we brought over a lot of those same people, like the concept artists. We had H.R. Giger and stuff like that, who was going to work on Dune, ended up working on Alien. So they're always connected somehow. So the fact that 2049 directly led to this new version is interesting.
Yeah, it's extremely interesting, all the connections that happen and how many times Dune has been tried to be made. Really, is that this is one of those like weird projects that people keep trying to nail, and that's what's, I think, so interesting about this newest one, is that I feel like this is the biggest swing. This is obviously the biggest swing we've gotten so far, trying to adapt Dune. You know?
It's a tough book to adapt. It's always, back in the day, it was always brought up like right there with like Lord of the Rings. It's just like, it's unadaptable.
Yeah.
Which I've always had big issues with that terminology, especially now. At this point, we've done all the unadaptable movies.
Yeah.
We've done Lord of the Rings. I said the same thing about Watchmen, and we did that. So nothing's unadaptable at this point. It's just a matter of like how difficult it might be to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Sandman was unadaptable, and then the Netflix even teaser shut me up, you know? Like, you're like, all right, now we playing, you know? Like, yeah, and of course the Audible series really fucking sells it.
So after like reading the book, in my experience, I did eventually, once, not too long after I had finished the book. This is a dense, lucid, very just like, it's a lot.
This version right here is fucking 600 pages. You know, like 600.
Mine is pushing almost at 900 because it's like, you know, stout.
Oh, there's a bunch of appendices. Okay, so it actually ends at 614. So wow, this is a nice version.
He now realizes almost a year later.
No, okay, so I mean, really, my first impressions of this is that I started watching it going, okay, so everyone's always said Star Wars stole from Dune. And I'm watching it going, and everyone always says Dune is just adult Star Wars. And I was like, okay. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, we're 40 minutes in, and I'm like, it's adult, but I was thinking to myself, I would still show this to a kid as like a fun Star Wars opera. I'm thinking to myself, and then the whole ending happens, and I go, never mind, fuck that, never mind. Like, this is a very violent, like, Star Wars. To be fair, no, it's not Star Wars. Star Wars straight up fucking steals things from this, and you can tell.
Dune was a progenitor for a lot of sci-fi stories, including Star Wars, because A New Hope wasn't until 1977. This book came out in 1968, I'm pretty sure. So like late 60s.
And there's just so much that you could tell George was like, shit, that's good.
Yeah, like just especially A New Hope specifically, because you're on Tatooine for most of it, at least for like the first act. So you're just like, oh, the Tusken Raiders are basically the Fremen.
Right.
And the way we talk about crate dragons in both expanded universe mythology and then later now with like the new canon with Disney and The Mandalorian, I'm like, oh, it's basically like the way the sandworm is in Dune. And it's just like, oh, the voice and stuff like that. Oh, it's kind of like the Jedi mind trick.
I know it's like, it's funny because like Jedi of course gets expanded on in the later movies, but you're right, New Hope is basically just like the voice, it's the same, you know, it's the same thing. Like, they're like, oh, it's the same thing. But I thought it was quite funny, kind of all the comparisons that that have to come up, because of course it's like George kind of blatantly steals for Star Wars for this. And I think that that's ultimately one of the major problems with making this movie is you're going to have people sitting here going, oh, Star Wars. And you're like, yeah, but no, obviously,
it's sort of almost the same issue you would run into trying to adapt Doc Savage or John Carter, as we've seen with John Carter, because it's one of those things are like, ooh, these are so old that like the entire fantasy sci-fi genre were kind of built on their corpses.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Flash Gordon. You can't fucking do Flash Gordon now unless you did like a cartoon, basically, because it's so, it's so ingrained in our pop culture. Like, if you guys didn't know how, like, it's funny, I Dune got me thinking about Tarzan in a way. I don't know why, but it brought this thought to me that, like, how much Tarzan has reached into our culture and changed the way stories are told, because every Tarzan novel starts with Tarzan in trouble. It always starts with him doing something in the jungle, and it like doesn't introduce you to Tarzan. It just like gets you in on it, and same happens for Flash Gordon. And it's like, it's those guys started how we do storytelling, of just like throwing people into it, because like a lot of, movies that were based on novels back in the day would take their time to try to get started, and they would, not throw you right in. And I think that even Dune has something to give to Tarzan in that way, that like it's like, hey, we have this big complicated plot, but you're here, and go, you're learning these people through this terrible experience that they're going through, and I think that's kind of interesting because, of course, Bond has to give it up to Tarzan. Bond directly steals from the formatting of Tarzan. And like, and I mean, basically, I'm just saying that our modern day cinema steals a lot from the serials of old. And, and in a way, you can't adapt those old serials without people being like, well, I've seen this, like, you brought up John Carter, and John Carter's the ultimate, like, yep, you guys shouldn't have done it exactly John Carter, like that should have been changed. You should have done something different.
It's in a weird spot where, like, if you try to make it faithful, it's going to seem derivative, even though it's not. Everything else is derivative. But then if you try to modernize it too hard, it might not feel like John Carter anymore. So it's a tough one.
It's a tough one. And I think that we're living in an age where we get remakes of Haunting of Hill House, which is, like a kind of boring movie, but became this TV show. Well, it's not a boring movie. It's a great movie. It's a classic. But like, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's one of those things that it's stuck in its sensibilities of its time. And now we have this deep, fleshed out, very human story, and
which is true. But even with Netflix Hill House, that's a very loose adaptation. Like the original black and white Haunting film is pretty damn close to the novel. Having just listened to it recently, I'm like, wow, the original movie just kind of nailed it.
Yeah, right.
So by the time you get to like the 1999 one, which has like a little bit of elements, but is also already going in its own direction, and then you get to the Mike Flanagan version, it's just like, yeah, this is a loose adaptation, but it works being its own thing.
Yeah, right. He does that. He's like, I'm gonna do a very loose adaptation of this, and you're like, good. That's the way to do it. But that's the thing. I think that's another important part about Dune here, is that this is not a very loose adaptation. According to what I've been reading, this seems very on the nose.
It's pretty close. And the changes that they make for it as a modern adaptation are smart ones for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that the what are they called? The Haggars, the Dave Bautista guys. They Harkonnens. They were red.
Harkonnens, I think they call them.
They were redheads before and made them bald this time. And you're like, you're like, see, that's a good change. But again, the death of the redhead in modern cinema, which we'll do a whole essay on at some point.
Yeah,
Can you
and it's
imagine?
also this film also does the same thing that both the Lynch movie did and the miniseries did, because I guess it just became an iconic thing. You know how the Baron Harkonnen like floats, like
Yeah.
you see Stellan Skarsgård like looming over his little pool. In the book, he doesn't float or fly. The idea is that he's so morbidly obese that he needs lifters and repulsors to even be able to walk properly to
Yeah.
support his own weight. The way the Lynch film translated that is like, he can fly.
Oh,
He,
you can
he,
fly.
he could just float, and that's just been a thing in every adaptation since. Whereas like in the first two versions, it was just kind of silly. Here they actually is just like, we're gonna do it because it gives them like a presence. We're gonna
Yeah.
make them intimidating as hell.
Oh my God. I mean, I know we're trying to go into, no, we should go into the differences first, because I think that's important, because of course I'm going to praise the cast. I want to go into each cast member and why this fucking movie fucking kills with that cast. But changes wise, I've also heard that, of course, that you can see it from the cover here. What are they called? What Fremen? The
Yeah, the
Fremen wear black in the movie, and obviously they wear white in the book because they would disappear into the sand. It just makes more goddamn sense, but it doesn't look as good on screen. So you're just like, I get it, small change.
Yeah,
like,
although I'm pretty sure every version of the still suit adaptation wise has been black, because it was black in the Lynch film, and I'm pretty sure there were also black still suits in the sci-fi miniseries.
Now,
It's just a more striking image.
Now, what else stood out to you as changes to this version? What else like stood out?
Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho is a much different characterization for that character, because Dune, the book, doesn't really have the characters that are there specifically for levity. Like, it's a pretty like heavy book, but they decided to make Duncan specifically like hey, I'm kind of the comic relief. Like, I'm sort of like the other sort of surrogate father who like loves Paul.
Yeah. Which first off, it throws me off the whole fucking movie that our hero is just Paul. Like I know that's the point. I can tell that's the point, that like that, and I think that's one of the things I admired about this, is that Dune kind of goes the Gundam route, which I guess Gundam probably stole it from this, is that they basically go, no, this is just the future. This isn't some alternate like Star Wars. They're like, no, this is so much in the future. There's so many references to human life on Earth.
As I just said, there's a character in this just epic, nuanced sci-fi fantasy epic. There's a dude in here named Duncan Idaho.
Yeah, right. You're like, what? It definitely throws me off, but I kind of, in a way, it almost feels like Clockwork Orange-ish in a way, where they're like, hey, we're gonna work in this like pop culture into our sci-fi later, and I dig that, especially stuff like I of course caught that their house is a house of Atreides, and that's from Iliad, King Atreus, and they just are calling themselves son of Atreus, and I was like, I dig that. Yeah,
so as far as like changes go, Liet Kynes isn't a woman in the book. And it's also one of those things where, like, she or he in the book is referred to as Dr. Kynes. Liet is a nickname or like a pseudonym for that character when they're using an alias, because Liet in Fremen culture, I believe, is like another word for God.
Oh, interesting.
But for the movie, just to sort of like streamline it for general audiences, just like Liet Kynes, whatever.
Whatever.
But as far as like other big changes, it's mostly stuff done to humanize the characters a little more. Like, we have Duncan being a little more light. We have Jessica, Paul's mom, being a lot more like vulnerable. She's very like held together and almost kind of like stoic. Like, she kind of runs the room. She like kind of runs the whole palace, whereas here they try to make her a little more vulnerable and not as overpowered, to be honest.
Yeah, I could see they're kind of going for more of a for the Game of Thrones reference, because I think there is some, some Game of Thrones love going on here. Is the lady in red, like the one who was advising the kings, it's like definitely they're trying to go for that, like instead of her just being in charge, she's in charge behind the scenes, like
the rest as far as changes are concerned are mostly just stuff that even for as long as this movie is, and the fact that this is strictly speaking part one,
yes,
like covering the first half of the first novel, it's just mostly just like, stuff that they couldn't really get into. Like there's a lot more about Dr. Yui than we actually get here.
I think that's my problem, but also could be the strength of this movie, is that this is just the first half. And I want to tell you, they did change on the HBO Max version. It now says Dune, and then there's a little trill, and it says part 1 underneath on the.
It said that when I went. That when I went to go see it in IMAX.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if they had like added that on HBO Max, because they just have been doing that lately, like they did for just Justice League, where they were just like making small changes and then adding it in, and you were like, the fuck? Like, you're like, wait, what? But it's like, it's one of those things that this falls into the category of Fellowship of the Rings, Force Awakens, and I guess you have to say New Hope, but basically, it's very much this, and I liked this watch. I like, me, Deshaun, when I'm watching at home, sometimes I get distracted. I get on my phone. I was locked in. I was locked in for this.
Did you watch it by yourself? Or did you watch it?
No, I watched it by myself, because I just was kind of like, okay, I have the time now. Let me get this fucking through. And I really enjoyed it. But it definitely. It feels like The Fellowship to me, where I remember as a kid, when I first watched The Fellowship, I was kind of like, oh, okay, what else? Like I was kind of like, what the fuck? That was great. Where the rest of it?
I felt that way too watching Fellowship, especially since at that point when I had first seen Fellowship, I hadn't read the books yet.
Yeah,
I had only read The Hobbit growing up, and then after I liked Fellowship so much, then I breezed through the rest of the books.
Yeah, I agree. I was the same way, where I had only read The Hobbit when I was younger, and so I read Fellowship and Two Towers and Return of the King after watching
Harry Potter. Come to think of it, I'd
really?
seen Sorcerer's Stone, and then I read Chamber of Secrets onward, and then eventually went back to read Sorcerer's Stone.
That's funny, because we read it with my mom when we were younger, so it was like one of those things that she read the first 2 or 3 books to us, and then we just took over and read the rest of the books ourselves.
Yeah.
So, but it's one of those things that this, and I said this with Force Awakens too, and I bring up Force Awakens because it's the obvious other reaction. You have Fellowship, where you're like, this is good, but what does it lead to? And then you get the greatness of Lord of the Rings, and you're like, hell yeah, 12 Oscars, baby, fucking 11 Oscars, let's fucking go.
All the Oscars.
You're like, hell yeah. But then you have Force Awakens, where you're like, oh, they did win an Oscar, but you're like, no, hey, like, you're like, hey, wait a minute. But it's like one of those things that, like, Force Awakens, I have no real problem. Like, I have some issues, but like, it's leading to things. And Last Jedi brings a lot of that across, and you're like, hell yeah. But then Rise of Skywalker's like, what? You had a plan? No, I don't.
New ideas are scary. Just bring back Palpatine.
Right, exactly. You're like, fuck, shit. Like,
yeah.
And that's basically my feeling here.
I do also sympathize with audiences who felt like they were potentially cheated, because I know plenty of people went into this. Of course, we know as nerds, because we always know about this stuff.
Yeah.
I know they're only adapting the first half of the first book. But general audiences don't see that in the marketing. And they're just like, what, part 1?
Yeah, right? I was hanging with my buddy, Nevin, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, I was watching a lot of TV shows, and me and my roommates were like, oh, we'll watch a movie, so it'll be a complete story. I really want a complete, finished story. And then they threw on Dune. And I'm like, you thought wrong, bro.
Yeah.
I was like, that was not the one. That was not the one. Because that, like, and I think that's mainly the issue, is that this is a great pilot. in TV terms. In TV
Mhm.
terms, this is a fucking awesome pilot. And this could lead to a great series. This could lead to Dune Part 2 being awesome. And then if they do the other books, we'll see. We'll see if they do that.
Thankfully, we're recording this, and this is coming out after we've already gotten the announcement that yes, they are actually going to do part 2, because that was up in the air for a bit. Denis Villeneuve is a great director, but his films tend not to do so well at the box office because they tend to be on a deeper level, and they seem almost like too sophisticated for general audiences. Like 2049 is an amazing film. That shit did not do well.
Yeah, and I think that they kind of were being. I thought it was kind of rude, or at least it was weird that the studio kind of held it over him as like we'll give you part 2 if it does well. But they even said, because I know he was very pissed that it was not just going to be a theater run, that it was also going to come out on HBO Max. He was kind of like, you're basically shooting my movie in the foot.
Yeah, Legendary was pissed about it too, because just like Godzilla versus Kong, they paid for most of it.
Yeah, and they're kind of like and basically WB said, if it does well on HBO Max, we'll give you part 2, no matter how the theater goes. Like they said, and thank God everyone and their fucking mother seemed to be like, Dune, like, and watch this. Like,
yeah, like the numbers seem to be good, and like I went to go see it in theaters just to support it in that format. I wanted to see it in IMAX. I had wanted to see this movie since this time last year, so I was going to go see it in theaters.
And this is a weird statistic, but this was the #1 most anticipated movie on Letterboxd all last year, and it was the #1 anticipated movie. It was top 5 anticipated movies on IMDb. So it's like, it's one of those things that people were really excited for this, and for somebody who, you know, you had recommended it to me, but I hadn't read the book, I hadn't seen the movie. I was kind of like, I kind of surprised by the hype that everyone had for this, you know, like everyone was very excited. And
there is a reverence for Dune, like in pop culture, and part
and
of that is definitely the David Lynch film.
But I see why now with watching this. This is an epic. In a lot of great ways. Of course, you can simple it down to it's Game of Thrones, Star Wars. You're like, you could put it in your modern terms and throw it like that. You could just be like, it's Game of Thrones, Star Wars. But what you mean by that is a political sci-fi. So what? And I think that that's what really when I said that, like, I was kind of like, oh, I mean, it's complicated, but it could be for kids. And of course that goes out the fucking window once the raid happens on. Once
you get to that big turning point,
that's definitely like, oh, okay, this is an adult movie, you know, because I was like, okay, complicated politics, but it has the fun sci-fi. Everyone's gonna love this, and then I was like, oh no, it's adult. Like, you can't show, like, this is definitely like an R-rated, straight up for for the adults. Sci-fi epic. And you know what? Fuck yeah, dude. Because what do we got? The Matrix, that's a rated R fucking sci-fi. Like,
and
what do we
thankfully
got?
the new one's going to be rated R.
Thank God. But that's what I'm saying, is that it's weird. Like, sci-fi is a very adult genre, and for some reason, media-wise, TV and movies, it's very. They try to keep sci-fi at least teenage age. And I know Netflix goes hard and they try to bring out the adult sci-fi, and I know everyone else is trying. But it's one of those things that, like, it's kind of a small genre for the adult sci-fi. And that Dune got me fucking excited by how, like, it was just kind of being like, hey, look, we're going to put this isn't just for everybody, you know, like, this is something else.
This is an epic. This is about something, and we threw a shitload of money at it.
They really did, though.
You could see it.
They really did, though. I mean, to compare to a movie I just watched today, I watched Shang-Chi, and it's the IMAX format on a Disney Plus. Which, yes, I think it does make a difference. I think the IMAX format. I kind of was like, okay, WB, now put everything on IMAX format on your service. I'm like, come on, give me more. But there's definitely, you can see a movie that was made before the pandemic and was pushed to after the pandemic, Dune, to Shang-Chi, which was shot in the pandemic and had to deal with the problems of the pandemic, you know, like is like, and I'm not saying it doesn't, like Shang-Chi looks really great at the end, and there's a lot of great CGI and practical effects that they use the whole time, but the beginning, some of the CGI in the beginning is very cheap. Like they have this one shot where and this was the one that stood out to me the most. It's supposed to be behind the Ten Rings assassin. You could see the tattoo on his neck. And he's supposed to be shooting a machine gun at some people. And you can just tell the gun's not firing. You can tell it's not like, and I'm not saying you have to use real gun. Like I know this whole thing with Rust is here. And like, and I'm kind of with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson that like, yes, we can use CGI guns, but you got to like, sell that bitch. You gotta sell that it's firing, you know, like that's and that one, I don't know why it stood out to me so much in my rewatch here that he was just like, he kind of like stands still and fires the machine gun, and you're kind of like, well, that didn't actually go off. Like you're like, shit. Well, like
that's basically me anytime I see a scene where people are having conversation in a car and the actor's constantly doing this the whole time.
Yep.
I drive car.
Yeah, I drive car. It move. Yeah, right. That's always the worst, dude.
Can't stand it.
Can't stand it. But I mean, that's probably the difference in filmmakers, in studio, in that Denis Villeneuve, am I saying it wrong again? Villeneuve, really painstakingly put this movie together, and you can fucking feel it.
Well,
man.
For one, they actually shot on location at an actual desert for most of it, and you can fucking tell.
Yep. I was kind of, and that was the thing that I was looking at the behind the scenes of Shang-Chi, and I was kind of like, most of this is a lot of green screen, you know, like, and I know they built some of it, and, you know, like, and I'm glad Morris is an actual physical prop, you know, like, and shit like that, but it's one of those things that, like, there is no fucking replacement for actually being there. Like we're going to try our best to make movies cheap as fuck and use the LED walls. That's really the future. It really is. And I don't believe we'll step away from that anytime soon, but you can fucking see the difference.
Right from the opening shots and narration where you get like these beautiful shots of like the desert as the wind is blowing. You're like, fuck.
Look, yeah, I mean, that didn't even need to be said. This movie's beautiful. This movie's, I mean, that's, I think, what Dennis brings to this fucking, to all his movies, is he makes them beautiful. Like, you know, like, cinematography is top on his list, and it really fucking shows.
Yeah, and we have just a great cast and crew here. Like, coming from someone who's read the books, like even aside from like the characterization changes they do to make it more accessible, this is a pretty damn good cast.
Oh my god, this cast made me want, like, that's what sucked me in. That's what I wanted to say. That's why I didn't want to bring it up too early, is that, like, fuck, that's why I was here, is that I was like, damn, this cast is stacked, baby. And then
we got a great crew on top of that. You have Denis Villeneuve in the director's chair. We have Hans Zimmer doing the score.
There's okay, I know we talked about Tenet having a good score, even though Hans Zimmer wasn't there.
Yeah, he turned it down to do this.
And you're kind of like, you did the good choice, my man. You did the good choice, because this soundtrack is unequivocally bussin'. It's fucking, it's incredible. I love it.
I had messaged you the last time I was at the theater, which was to go see an anime movie.
Yes.
It was the third My Hero Academia movie. And all I could hear when I was just walking through this hallway down this AMC was like a few Dune rooms that were screening. Yeah, all I could hear was just like Hans Zimmer going fucking hard.
Okay, like, throat singing is, first off, very fucking hard to do. It's fucking very hard to do. It takes years of skill to fucking accomplish and do well. And then for him to build it into this fucking soundtrack and just, like, it's incredible. It's incredible. It's an incredible soundtrack because it's Hans Zimmer flexing for, it seems like Christopher Nolan maybe was holding him in a box a little bit because he's fucking flexing here, man. Like,
it definitely feels like his biggest flex since like the Interstellar score, because I fucking love his score for Interstellar.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, oh, we gave this madman an organ.
Yeah, right. This one's definitely like, we gave this guy throat singers. Like, it's just like, and you're like, hell yeah, bruh. I was absolutely head over heels about the soundtrack. I was totally like, it was like that Inception moment. That's the moment that I fell in love with Hans Zimmer. Is the moment the water came up on Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Inception, and the sting comes in. I literally couldn't. I just like busted. I was just like, oh Jesus Christ! Nerd came immediately, like nerdgasmed everywhere, because that is.
And then you find out he also did other stuff that you'd also loved, like the score for The Lion King. You're like, oh yeah, no shit.
Right? You're like, damn, this man flexing too hard. And really this, like, I don't mean to give Hans Zimmer another fucking Oscar, but give this man a fucking Oscar for this soundtrack.
Another one.
Give another one. Because, like, really, this is something else. And I'll say it again, this is something else. That's all I'm going to say. It's different, it's big, it takes a swing. It's something to experience is basically it.
So I guess we can go, since we've already brought up the cast, we could kind of go character by character, since we were sort of touching on that before.
Yeah. So everybody's favorite Timothy Claremont is, of course, in this fucking... What?
Timothy Chalamet.
Chalamet.
That's the American way to pronounce it.
Chalamet.
It's technically Timothée Chalamet. But to make it simple for you, let's just go with Timothy.
It's really Timothy? Like, I didn't know.
Yeah, it's Timothée. Timothée Chalamet.
Wow. He's everyone's favorite boy right now. He's he's literally our Leonardo DiCaprio. He's this generation's Leonardo DiCaprio, where every actor is afraid of this man because he's showing up at every fucking rehearsal and he's getting every audition, and he's getting the role.
He doesn't even have to scream that much.
No, he doesn't.
I love Leo, but boy, he loves to scream. He loves to scream.
Loves a good scream. But this is like, it really is. It's funny how much.
How many other things have you seen him in?
A couple things, but not. I definitely am behind. I haven't seen Lady Bird. Did you watch Call Me by Your Name? I haven't seen Call Me by Your Name.
Call Me by Your Name is really good.
But the man was like, the thing about Dune is it came out the same day as The French Dispatch, which was another movie he was in. That's the real flex of the whole fucking 2021, coming out with two movies on the same.
Yeah, it's kind of like when it's kind of like Scarlett Johansson being nominated for Best Actress in Marriage Story, and then also being nominated for Best Supporting Actress in Jojo Rabbit.
Right? You're just like, what? It's definitely like, hold on, wait a minute. No, you might be right. I have only seen, of course, the Cadillac commercial where he's Edward Scissorhands, and
he's in Interstellar as well.
And Interstellar, I am very behind on the Charlemagne. Sorry, I can't fucking.
Let's just call him Timothy.
Timothy,
just make it easy.
It will make it easy for me, Timothy, because I am definitely have not seen anything else, and I mean, I was surprised how good he was. Like he's surprising. He's got a lot of depth to him. He doesn't just come across in any weird way. Like I'm just like,
yeah. And Paul as a character would be very easy to come off as just kind of blasé and monotone, and I feel like he rides the line pretty well.
Or even for better or for worse, how whiny Luke is. If it's like Paul doesn't come across as like a whiny guy, he's to be fair, this was actually like, I kind of really liked Paul. I thought it was, first off, such a weird name, but it was kind of like, he seems like a friendly dude. He doesn't care about, all the decorum that everyone seems to care about. And I'm like, all right, dude. The only weird thing is that you're fantasizing about Zendaya in a fucking desert for most of this movie. That's the only weird. But I understand. I get it.
Plenty of people fantasize about Zendaya. What does the set dressing matter?
Yeah, wasn't matter. I think he does really well, but of course, he's not. It's like he kind of gets. It's like even though he's the main character, he kind of gets overshadowed by the rest of this fucking cast here. It's like it doesn't matter how well he did. It meant like it really matters how the rest of the cast fucking fares. And of course, we've already talked about the most beautiful woman in the world, Rebecca Ferguson. We already said that in our Doctor Sleep and Shining review.
Episode.
Go back to that episode. It's a great episode. And her playing his mom, Paul's mom, Leah Atreides, is
Lady Jessica.
I think she's fantastic. I mean, I don't know, have anything really to base it on, you know, like you said, I know that there's some changes here, but I really did like the part of like this mother who's very much in this dark religion, but wants to take, like, has her best interests of her son at heart, but in a obviously the weirdest fucking way, that she's like, I'm gonna make you the savior. You're like, like
yeah, it's two very different types of support.
Yes.
Which is also not so much like a big change or anything, but when we start to get to Duke Leto, Paul's dad, he is a little more fatherly here. Just openly, just because you got to sell that emotion. We're making a motion picture over here.
I know, but how good? I mean, do I have to say that Oscar Isaac was good? I mean, if you listen to this podcast, you probably know that man was about to deliver an Oscar-worthy performance, of course he did.
That was like the two when they announced the cast, because I had already read the book at this point. Him and Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen were the two casting moments. And I was just like, ooh, yeah, you got it. You nailed it. You got it.
He just looks so good in the spacesuit. I hate to fucking say it.
Yeah, with that fucking silver armor and like the slick back hair and the beard. Like, oh shit.
Oscar Isaac looks damn good in a spacesuit. That's all. That's the reason why. I don't know why I laughed so hard at him being like, I wanted to be a pilot. I know that wasn't supposed to be a joke. I know that's probably in this fucking movie.
Yeah.
But it's so funny to hear Poe Dameron being like, I wish I was a pilot. You're like, yes, you were, sir.
Yeah, especially Oscar Isaac being one, like him and John Boyega being the most vocal about like, they didn't know what the fuck they were doing.
Yeah, right. And you're just like, that's definitely, I think sci-fi fans will appreciate here is that, like, if you felt that the new Star Wars trilogy is just like them throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping what the fuck sticks, and, you know, some of it sticks, but, you know, it's just throwing ideas out. Dune feels like a very formulated, like, thought through, methodical adaptation and movie here. It definitely
it helps that you have this fucking tome to work off of.
True, but I think that you got to give it to Denny here. You got to give it up to Denny. The man wanted to adapt this, adapt it well. He fought for doing a part 1 even though he wasn't fucking secured for a part 2, you know, like, and
shout out to the writer. His name is escaping me right now. He's had a bunch of fucking credits.
John,
I think it's John Roth.
Sorry, I got it. John Spahitis, Eric Roth, and Frank. And
Eric Roth, yeah. It's had a few writers on it.
Yeah, it's got a couple on there, and Eric Roth is like, you know, Forrest Gump, you know, like, and A Star Is Born. You're like, oh, okay. you're like, that's just stacked.
Hey, from what I've heard, the new Star Is Born is good. I just don't care about a 4th version of A Star Is Born. That's just basically my thing.
I mean, to be fair, though, this is from the same writer who brought us such trash, John Spaihts, and I mean, we're talking up these writers. Spates. We're talking up the writers here. We're talking up the writers, but I will shit on this man for these 3 movies. He wrote Prometheus, Passengers, and Doctor Strange. Like, and you're like, oh God, dude, God, like.
Passengers is a weird one.
And Passengers was weird. It was so weird.
But that's also like another one where, like, if the marketing for Passengers was a little different and a little more honest, I don't think people would have reacted as weirdly to it.
It's still weird that he,
but
like, basically gaslights a woman into falling in love with him, you know, like it's super fucking weird in that way, you know. You're like, I don't know if I like these main characters. Like they're
Not that
being
you
super
need to.
no, not that you need to, but you're like, this is creepy. Like even
Oh yeah, Dune is a tough son of a bitch.
I did want to point out the last movie he wrote before Dune was The Mummy, which you're like, that man should have probably been kicked out of Hollywood for that fucking shit. But then he fucking gets Dune. You're like, all right, dude, go. I guess do your thing. Like,
but going back to it, like Dune is a tough one to adapt, especially because the way it's written, there is so much, and you already get this anyway with novels, but there is so much internal monologue in Dune. It is very cerebral. So that you get a lot of stuff that's just like in the character's thoughts. That's like a key part of their development and stuff like that you can't really put to film unless you want to do the clumsy thing that the David Lynch film did, was to just have characters stoically stand static in a camera while voiceover plays as if they're thinking. They start whispering, he is the one, the spice melange.
Hey, no, this is not an SMR podcast. Stop whispering into the fucking mic.
It's fucking weird, man. It's going to be, when you eventually do watch the Lynch film, just out of sheer curiosity, it's going to be fucking wild.
I am going to. Because like this piqued my curiosity almost more, where I was like, I like this a lot. So now I got to see what the fuck David Lynch did wrong. You know, like I got to see what he did. But we are saying the cast. And I think that Jason Momoa is actually a really good ad here, because of course,
it's a fun ad. It's just one of those things where like, yeah, it's different from the book, but I'm not mad about it.
It's just like of course you guys. I guess no spoilers, because they kind of say it right off the bat. It's not even a spoilers thing. Is that Paul comes up to him and he's like, "I had a vision. You died," and he's like, "Don't worry, I'll never die." And you're like, okay, Jason Momoa. And you're just like, you gonna die soon. Like, it was one of those things where I was like, I can see why they did this like scene, but it's like, you were kind of like, yep, that man is a goner. Like, you know, like,
but at least it's also one of those things where it sort of like follows through. It's not like the Empire Strikes Back thing where like, I had a vision that Han and Leia will die, I'm gonna go intervene. It's like, well, they didn't die, but there were consequences to this. It's more just like, I had a vision, you died, and I could not prevent that.
Yeah, right. You're like, oops. And then I think of course, Stellan Skarsgård is absolutely fantastic as
he is
the Baron.
Totally. And I had thought this while I was watching the movie. And then watching interviews with him afterwards, I'm like, I fucking knew it. He is totally doing Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now.
Really? That's so funny, because that's really it, right?
That's that performance. I'm like, because I got those vibes while I was watching it. I'm like, you trying to pull some Apocalypse Now shit on me?
And you know that if you watch this show, Apocalypse Now is in my top 5 movies.
There's literally the shot where when he comes out of the pool, he like wipes the top of his bald head. I'm like, that's literally the fucking shot.
Yeah, that shot made me be like, Apocalypse Now? Like, it was weird. It made me be like, what are we up to?
It's a different performance. The Baron in the books, because this book was written in the 60s, is a lot more flamboyant and a lot more just sort of like megalomaniacal. He's kind of the galaxy's biggest fucking troll. But here they're just like, nah, we're going to make him actually intimidating.
Yeah, make him scary. And then I think that, you kind of, it's like, I already said no spoilers, but we're going to fucking go into it with these characters, guys. I'm sorry but basically you've heard what makes this fucking thing work. So go watch the movie, come back. We're talking spoilers now. You paused it. You're back now.
We're getting to this view a little later than most would, so I'm sure you've probably seen it by now.
Probably seen it. Josh Brolin's character, Gunry Halleck. Gurney. I knew it was another one where I was like, that motherfucker's gonna die. Like, I was just like, you know when a movie has an air of, I have the balls to kill the characters, you know, like, I don't know if it's because I've been watching horror movies all month for October, but like, I can now tell when a movie has the balls to fucking actually kill somebody, you know, like, and it's funny because sometimes you watch horror movies and you're like, so no one died? You're like, so no one fucking died? Like,
Gurney is another one where the characterization is a little different. He's not as like serious. I mean, in the books, he fucking plays the balisette.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the David Lynch film, he was Patrick Stewart.
Oh, okay. So very serious, but obviously Patrick Stewart. You know, like you're just like same thing as Picard, where you're just like obviously very serious, but the man plays a flute. You know,
the man still has a heart.
But I really did love. I mean, right off the bat, you love him where he's like smile, and he's
smile,
like,
Gurney. I am smiling.
I was just like, yeah, it's another Josh Brolin character being great. Like, and I think he's fantastic in this role. It's a fun role. I think obviously he would take this role. It's one of those things that he gets to scream, run around, kill a bunch of people, look tough. Who wouldn't want this fucking role? You know, like
it's a pretty easy layup for him.
Yeah, right. It's pretty much like an alley-oop. But I think, I think Dave Bautista did a great job here. I think you got to throw it out to him. I think it's you got to use Dave Bautista more.
I'm wondering what we're gonna do with that character in part 2.
Yeah,
because he doesn't have as big of a role in the second half of the book, but a lot of people are theorizing that they're gonna merge his role with Fade, who is really important in the book, and just sort of combine the two. Because the Baron basically has 2 nephews.
Oh, okay.
You have Raban, who's like the big, like brutish one, who's played by Batista, and then you have Fade, who's basically like the anti-Paul.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So a lot of people are theorizing because Batista's in this movie, and he doesn't do that much.
No,
so it might be expanded on for the second part. They think they might just hybridize those 2 characters. I'm not sure.
It's kind of one of those things that I hate to keep bringing up Lord of the Rings and in the series in general, but it's very much in The Hobbit, the orc, like the special, I forget what they call that orc.
Yeah.
I forget what they call him, but the white orc, basically. Dave Bautista gives off very much that energy where you're like, that guy's going to fuck you up. And that's the reason why they keep giving the shots to him. You know, like he's going to be very angry and he's going to fuck you up. Like, but I can see what you're saying, but I almost feel like they might still. I don't know if they'll combine the characters.
I think they can still keep him as the heavy in part 2, because it would be weird to not have Fade, because Fade is like a fan favorite character.
Yeah,
and he's even a big deal in the Lynch film where he's fucking played by Sting.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things that I have a big doubt that they would combine characters, especially how meticulous this is. I doubt they would combine things like that. You know, like. I do have to give it up to the man who absolutely steals the fucking show with the literally like 5 minutes of fucking screen time he has. Javier Bardem, fuck yeah, bro.
As Stilgar. Oh god, he was so perfect.
Oh, he's so good. He's so good. He's one of those things that's like, the minute you see him in No Country for Old Men, you're like, that man's fucking fantastic. And then for him to like, and I mean, he's good in the Bond movies, but it's one of those things that like, you're like, come on.
I mean, let's be honest, he kind of hard carries Skyfall.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where you're like, this man just needs time to run, you know? And it's like, and I feel like this is one of those things where you're like, come on.
One of those casting choices where I'm like, oh, that's an interesting choice for Stilgar. I'm just not quite sure about it. And then actually seeing like how he portrayed him, like, wow, yeah, you fucking nailed it.
Right? You're like, and you got it. And then I love that David
Dastmalchian.
Thank you so much. I love that man is getting so much fucking work. I fucking love it. Like, this man is having 2021. That's for fucking sure. He is you saw him as the polka dot man in Suicide Squad, and he's fantastic as this character here, as this like brooding, like helping the Baron. Like, it's just so
that
he's
character
perfect.
Has a more expanded role and an entire subplot in the book, but to be honest, that was like one of my least favorite subplots, so I don't care that they cut it in this case. I'm like, I don't care. They just basically make it like for someone, because he's an assassin in the book.
Yeah.
Whereas here, he's just kind of like the crony, so we can give the Baron someone to like talk to and bounce off of, but I don't mind it.
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. I think he's just fantastic. I think he's having quite the 2021 with a lot of shit. Like
Yeah,
he's
doesn't he
Calendar
also?
Man,
Yeah, I
he's
was just
Polka
about to
Dot
say Calendar
Man.
Man.
And I love that Calendar Man and Suicide Squad calls him a pussy when he plays
Yeah.
Calendar Man in the fucking thing. You're like, hell yeah. And he's in Flash as Abracadabra, but fucking hell. I'm sorry. I'm so done with the Flash show. I'm just like, please.
I'm
It's one of those things that
I'm just done with everything like CWDC
Yep.
related. The only thing I would potentially go back to is Black Lightning, just because I really fucking dug that first season.
Yeah.
But
it's one of those things that now that we're getting some HBO Max DC stuff, you're kind of like, okay, stop doing the CW stuff. Take that away from
that's
them.
where that Green Lantern show is going. So I'm like,
Yep, and Peacemaker's literally coming in a month. You know, like
Yeah.
like that's I feel like that's the big step. It's like we've already had Titans, of course, on HBO Max exclusively, and many other DC stuff, but like literally a spin-off show from a movie is big. I feel like it's the big step for DC Universe. I feel like it really is. But what I'm trying to say is that I think that he's David
Desmouch,
is fantastic, and he's great in this role.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course Zendaya doesn't do much in this fucking movie, but she's a dream girl, and that's kind of the point, you know, like is that it works so perfectly, you know, like you're kind of like, okay.
One of my fucking coworkers had said, like, I can't wait till we get to part 2 so Zendaya can do more than kind of stand around like she's in a perfume commercial.
Yeah, right? It just felt like it, like I know that's like the book, but it felt so weird to be like, oh yeah, our big main female character just shows up in his dreams sometimes. And you're like,
because we're only covering half of the book, so it just feels kind of awkward that way. Zendaya was one of those ones where I'm like, yeah, that seems about right. That seemed like the predictable casting for Chani to me, and I like her fine in the part. It's just one of those things where, and normally I wouldn't care, but it is weird. She sticks out like a sore thumb because she's like the only one of the Fremen who doesn't have an accent.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't ask her to do some sort of accent. It's kind of like, okay, whatever, I guess. But it's like they made you do an accent for Lola Bunny. They couldn't ask you to do an accent for this. Like what? What? But I mean, I'll say it as I've said. I think I said before in previous episodes. I think Zendaya is great. I think she's one of our rising stars that can actually like stand out, do a great performance. She's kind of, and this is a weird thing to say, but she's kind of our new Scarlett Johansson, where she can be in these roles, look beautiful, but give these fantastic deep performances, and also bring in the box office numbers like Scarlett does, you know, like where it's like, where people are like, oh, Scarlett's in that, I'll go see that. And like people are like, oh, Zendaya's in that, I'll go see that. Like, you know, like it's definitely like that, you know, and I think that's kind of interesting where she's this kind of niche she's made, you know, like where she's MJ in the Spider-Man movies, which is huge, you know, like, and then now she's the main character in the Dune franchise now. And which did you know that they're doing a HBO Max Dune prequel series?
Yes, I know they were before this first movie had come out, but I know like the head writer on that had like moved away from that project because now he just wants to solely focus on
part 2. Which makes a lot of sense.
I don't know where that's at now.
Yeah, I'm like, does that mean that it's benched forever, or is it kind of like Game of Thrones, House of the House of the Dragon, where they're like, we'll just keep working on it until it's done, you know, like, which I might just happen. I do think that Dune could be that big franchise for them, you know, like it's like, I don't think that we should dive deep on everything. I don't think we should Star Wars but
I know Denny has said that he would love to adapt Dune Messiah, and I'm just like, I mean, sure, wishful thinking. I'm just glad that we're even getting a part 2 to cover the rest of the first book. And I had said this before. I think it was on Facebook, where I was just like, the weird thing about doing the Dune sequel books is that even though I haven't even read Messiah, I know enough about like the sequels to know that they kind of go like full Last Jedi, kind of like right off the bat. Just like, okay, here's the chosen one narrative. Here's sort of like the white savior thing. And then the sequel books are immediately just like, now let's explore why that's a fucking problem.
I do like that though, you know, like
I appreciate it, but given like how everyone gets about the precious war, the precious canon, all my preconceived notions.
Right.
I'm not sure how it would resonate with audiences.
We'll see, you know, like it's definitely
the sci-fi miniseries covered the first 3 books.
Really?
Yeah, they did Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune.
That's a fucking swing.
So they at least got pretty far.
It's fucking wild. Why did Sci-Fi Channel go so hard on something these things? It feels like true nerds were working there and they were like, we can do it. We can do it. We can do this. Like and made it happen. But basically, I want to show off the strengths of this movie. Dune has fantastic cinematography. I did at first I was kind of against the shield look that they had, but then of course I was immediately like, "Yep, that's great." Like,
plus you don't have the David Lynch film to compare it to.
Yeah, I've seen the clips of the squares,
the Minecraft bodies.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck is that? When I saw the clip, I was like, what? Okay.
Yeah, they kept it simple. That's basically what it is in the book. It's like a second skin. It looks like an after image, and you have like the slow blade penetrates the shield, so they have to fight completely differently than normally in this universe.
Love that.
And I like that they had the little simple visual indicator of just like when something is penetrating it, it turns red. It's like, yeah, great. That works.
How cool was, I mean, of course the darts going into people was really cool, but how fucking cool was them dropping bombs and it slowly inching its way through the shield and then going off? How fucking epic is that shit? It's just like that one moment of like delay makes it so much more like anticipation. It really adds to that, like,
that
the
definitely
fighting
speaks
here.
to the bit with the dart where dude, like he knows it's there, but he can't do a thing, can't reach it. It's just gonna come.
Oh, I love that, dude. I was one of those moments where I was like, oh, that's nice. That's cool. Like, I was like, okay. And it was definitely the moment where I was like, okay, this is no longer a kid's film. I was like, we're getting wild here. I mean, especially the Duke Leto's death scene was especially the moment where you're like, fuck, we are no longer kids. Like, this is not fucking around. Like, this is like, hey, suicide. But I think the costume design, of course, has to be shouted out as a huge strength to this. I think that the spacesuits look amazing. The Fremen look incredible.
I also love the look of the different planets because we don't, in the book, we don't really get a look at those planets. Like, they're sort of described offhand, but like Caladan, which is where we start before we go to Arrakis, is really well represented and looks beautiful, and you get like a real sense of like, look at how beautiful and lush this land is. You have that great shot of like Paul just putting his hand in water.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is just a given over here, and this will become like a valuable resource once we get there.
That was definitely a great piece of visual storytelling. Like, they didn't even have to say like, some character could have walked in and said that. Like, somebody could have been like, oh, this is easy here, but it's not going to be easy over there.
How while it lasts.
But they just kept doing him reaching his hand into the stuff, and you're like, there, visual storytelling. I love this.
We also get like a great peek at like the Sardaukar planet, which is like that planet of assassins with like people hanging upside down and bleeding and the fucking throat singing and like blessing them with the blood on their forehead. I'm like, this is fucking dope.
I know. Dope. That was dope. I was like, shit. like costume design, production design, absolutely insane. Especially big fucking shout out to the Thopters, to the fucking, oh, holy shit.
The Thopters were so cool.
They fucking captured my imagination. I hate to sound like that because it's so cheesy, but they just fucking, I saw it and I was like, hell yeah. It's just like, it was an immediate, that's amazing. I love that. Look at the way that ship moves and how they really thought out how this ship would actually move and work. And it really shows. And the amount of Thopter in this too. You could have just had a couple Thopter scenes and you would have been like, those were cool, love that. But then the whole end is just Thopter riding and there's so many chases with them and you're kind of like, hell yeah, fucking love this.
Dope as hell.
They really are though. They're kind of like a dope X-Wing and
and the sound design really fucking sends this. I'm very, very glad I saw this in IMAX because I would notice the difference versus trying to watch clips, especially with the way the voice is represented.
Yes, I loved the layered voice here. Sound design wise, that's incredible. To make it not no voice go too overpowered another, it's it comes through as a ripple almost. Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
It's portrayed pretty perfectly, right from the jump when you get the Gom Jabbar scene, which is the thing where he puts his hand in the box.
Yeah. Oh man.
It's just come here and kneel, and he's just sort of done it without even realizing he has.
Yeah, I love that. I really did. I know we were saying it's kind of like Star Wars, but that's the part that made you realize it was different, where you're like, okay, they don't even get to think about it as it happens to them, it's just and we're there, and they slightly show it off earlier when he's trying it on his mom, but to see it in full effect, you're like, hell yeah, that's cool. Definitely just so interesting and sound design wise, incredible.
Yeah.
Now, what other praise do we have to sing for this? Am I missing? What am I missing here?
Well, we talked about the cast. We talked about the actors. We've talked about the score. We've talked about the sound design. I guess we could get into speculation from your part as someone who hasn't read the book as to where do you feel this story's potentially going.
Well,
or what might have stood out to you that maybe would have been I feel like maybe this would have been more touched on in the book.
No, I think that's what the part that I liked about this is that it does end like Fellowship, where you are left at to quote Princess Bride, the pit of despair. You are literally, oh, where were we? Oh, right, the pit of despair. It is literally that. Is that they do such a good job at being here's all these support systems and why these guys' life is okay, and then they just blow all the shit and leave them with nothing, and you're kind of
from a thematic standpoint, it makes sense as to why it ends that way, because it pretty much ends with Paul saying, no, we're not going to escape. Yeah. We're going to stay and we're going to get them back.
You're right. I liked that, it definitely, it's we get the whole hero's journey almost here, even though it's one movie. And I think that it's funny because that's my thoughts here, is that we got the hero's journey in this first movie. So this next movie has to do something very strange to the hero's journey. And I feel like there's something the hero's journey is going to get subverted in a lot of ways for this next bit. And I know you've already said the sequel subverts it even further, but
we'll get a little weird. It's gonna be interesting.
You can tell it's gonna get fucking weird. First off, I always knew Dune was gonna be weird because why would David Lynch sign up to direct it? Why the fuck would he sign up to direct anything that wasn't just super fucking weird? So I always assumed Dune was gonna be weird, and that's what was kind of weird here with this, is that I kind of expected more weirdness, that was my one thing.
they did tone it down a little bit from the book just to make it a little more palatable. The book was never as weird as like the David Lynch film tries to be, because it's got that like those David Lynchiisms are just like, why is this here?
Why is it like
what
this?
are you doing?
What are we up to?
Step away from the Coke.
No, it's coffee now. It's just fucking coffee.
Just coffee now.
Just coffee now.
It was in the 80s.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Sorry, David Lynch. Probably true. It's the 80s.
But it's just like, it is weird and like very dreamlike, but it's presented in a way here that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like, Paul's visions could have very much have easily have just been a lot of annoying voiceover, but here you sort of get that like dreamlike quality of like, he's not quite sure what it means yet, and he keeps speculating about it like you do with a dream.
Yeah, I definitely dug that, and I dig right before even they play the logos. They say the line, and that kind of sets the tone for almost everything, that dreams are messages from the deep, and you're like, shit, yeah. Like, I don't know why. From that moment, I was like, okay, now we're talking. Like,
here's something set piece wise we can talk about, since we were talking about like the design, the sets, and stuff like that. The worms.
The worms. I mean, so that, of course, the worms are going to be hard because everyone's going to be like Sarlacc from Star Wars, where you're like, but they stole that from Dune. Like,
and dragon, which back in the old canon didn't even look like a worm. It was like a giant Komodo dragon, and then they made it worm-like, so now it made it even more like Dune.
It made it even more. I mean, of course, they make these worms so damn intimidating.
Yeah.
I definitely like, it's just like makes you go, what the fuck?
It makes sense, because in Fremen culture in the book, they're almost like worshipped like gods.
Yeah, I love the end of the riding on the worms at the end being like, hey, you know, like it's kind of like this whole like, yeah, you thought they were scary, but we ride on them, motherfucker.
I love the sense of scale when they approach. I love the effect on the sand, how it like contorts and scatters and then becomes soft, so it almost becomes like quicksand. So that's another thing to worry about.
I love that. I thought I think it's very hard because of course people are going to compare. They did a good job of trying to differentiate it, but you can't go too far, you know, because then you're not adapting it like the book would. Yeah. So, like,
I also sort of like those like whisker, like whale-like teeth on the inside. I know people on the internet have made a bunch of jokes about it because the internet immediately goes to whatever the dirty thing is.
Yep.
Look, kind of looks like a butthole. I'm like, well, that wasn't my first impression. My first impression, right when they showed the worm with the open mouth from the trailer, is that it looks like an eye.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it looks like it's looking out at you or something like that. I mean, they're intimidating. It's basically, they did a good job. They took this monster that could be silly, like in Tremors, or the Tremors sequels.
Tremors is trying to be silly.
Yeah.
To be honest,
and made it intimidating. You know, like made them actually scary. Which is big, you know, like it's huge to do that, because it's just one of those things that it's a worm, you know, like it's a worm, it's not scary, you know, like it's just,
like your mind's gonna go to, like you said, like Tremors. Your mind will probably go to like not only that, but with Mando being so big, your mind's gonna go to the Crate Dragon, and you'll probably go to like Beetlejuice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things that like there's been so many that like, to try to actually make it scary, they did a good job. I think, but of course, I think that there's, of course, they do such a good job at being like, the worms are not the scary part about this planet. You fucking humans are, you know? Like,
one of many things that's an issue with this planet.
Right? They're just like, hey, it's mostly you. So the thing that made me excited for the sequels, and it's only one line that made me intrigued for these sequels, is the Baron when he's listing off, when he's going, my Arrakis, and he says, my Dune. And that made me immediately go, what the fuck does that mean, dude? Like, you know, like, because I watched the whole movie, and I'm like, there is no indication that, like, something special is happening with the Dunes. Like, I just assumed title sand planet Dune, you know, like,
yeah, it's like Dune is basically just like a nickname for Arrakis.
yeah, but it's like the way he says my Dune, maybe be like, is there a mystical fucking Dune? Is there like a fucking something special about the dunes? Like what are you saying? Like, I don't like, I'm like, does he know something that obviously the rest of everyone doesn't know? You know,
I
like,
guess we'll find out. I did really like the way the spice was represented in this version too. How it's Chani literally says it, like when the wind blows, you can see spice in the air.
yeah.
You get those little like twinkles of sand, and you can tell what's spice and what's not. Usually, they tend to like color it a certain way, like even with like that bookmark I showed you, it's like blue. But I
Yeah.
like that here it's like
just
orange,
shiny.
so it just blends in with the sand.
Yeah, it's just shiny. It's like, and I do love that. Like,
Oh, another thing in Star Wars, the spice mines of Kessel.
right?
Hell, you
Like,
even have Boba Fett and Mando go, "This isn't a spice stream."
oh, you're like, is Dune in the same universe as Star Wars? You're like, wait a fucking second.
Well, we
You're
know
like,
ET is, so who knows?
yeah, right. You're like, dun dun. Like, but basically, I really enjoyed this, but it really does all rely on part two. It completely, like Force Awakens, like Fellowship of the Rings, where I feel like if you leave Fellowship of the Rings as is, like somehow in some universe, the other two movies didn't fucking get made.
So
Fellowship.
basically like the Ralph Bakshi version, which only got to adapt the first two books and never got to do Return of the King.
Is that like Fellowship can stand as its own, but it definitely gets stronger with the other two movies. And I think that Dune is exactly like that, where Dune Part 1 here is very strong. It's a lot of fun. It sets a lot of groundwork. The world building's great. Of course, the cast and crew are top notch. You're talking like the best in the industry working on these movies, and you can't ask for anything more, you know? Like, you can't ask, like, this is the Steven Spielberg situation where he's just like fucking bringing the best people together to make these movies. And that's such like a godsend. You're like, hell yeah. Now it's all about that follow through. It's all about that follow through, because if part two sucks, it's over. You know, like this will get forgotten, just like Dune, David Lynch. It'll just be like shoved down into pop culture if part two sucks.
Yeah,
like,
and to be fair, the Lynch film at least did cover all of the book. It just had to cut a lot of stuff out to try and condense that into one story. Here, I think we'll be fine, especially because the second half of the book is where all the action is.
Yeah.
So you'll at least have that.
Right.
And you have the foundation laid there. So I think we're in good hands. It was just that nerve, that trepidation going into seeing this before we got the news that we'd be even getting another one.
Yeah, it's definitely
that was more harrowing. Now that I know that we're actually getting it and Denis Villeneuve is still directing it, I'm like, okay, we're good. We'll be fine.
We're fine. It's gonna be okay.
We just need to get the green light to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad it's greenlit. I'm glad we're moving forward. I'm glad we're getting more.
Yeah, but we'll get it for a while though.
Yeah. And I do hate Warner Brothers holding a story hostage almost for box office numbers, which they are themselves sabotaging.
We could have just shot these back to back.
This is definitely weird that they didn't shoot this back to back. I hope that doesn't hurt the sequel, you know, like, because you don't have the same creative momentum, you know, like, but maybe it'll be a good thing. They'll have time away so they can like really nail it for part two, you know. Like,
from what I've heard, like the pandemic pushing this back so far like really helped them in the editing room, because they just like, well, there's nothing we can do except work on it a little more. So
which is at least nice, you know, like, and in a world where some movies are literally shot and edited in 6 months and then slapped out, you know, like it's amazing. It must have been amazing for the editor to be like, okay, well now I get to take a 4th, 5th, 6th pass at this, you know, like just keep going at it, you know,
keep touching it up.
Keep touching it up. So basically, HBO Max knocked it out of the park with this one. Warner Brothers, legendary. I want more. And for HBO Max wise, this was such a boon for me because I wanted to go see it in theaters, and I probably still might. But I gotta see French Dispatch first. I gotta see Last Night in Soho. I got other movies I gotta go fucking see in theaters.
Yeah, I gotta go see French Dispatch too.
I feel like that's one I gotta see in theaters. I love seeing Wes Anderson in theaters. It feels different. It's
yeah. Did I see I did see Isle of Dogs in theaters. So like
really?
that and
Nice.
Grand Budapest, I saw both in theaters.
So yeah, I love Grand Budapest in theaters. Grand Budapest, oof, I love that movie. But beside the point,
support your artists. Go
support
see
your
in the
artists.
theater.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw Last Night in Soho. It was great. It was Edgar Wright. I'm gonna go support him.
Right, and it's one of those things that like if you have to watch it at home, do it the day it comes out. You know, like not even watch the whole thing. What I did to support Dune to make sure it got part 2, I just put the first 5 minutes on and walked the fuck away. I didn't have time to watch it that day, so I didn't want to get dragged in. So I was just like, I'll put the watch number on this so that way they go, oh, another person watched it. But you know, I did the same thing for Squid Game where I'm like, I still haven't watched Squid Game, but I was like, I'm gonna support South Korean cinema happening on Netflix. Absolutely. You know, like I'm like, hell's yes. Let me put a view on this so that way
we get well enough to get a part 2 is maybe a good indicator not only to Warner Brothers but other studios that like, yeah, we can have more sophisticated sci-fi fantasy stories. It doesn't have to be like lighter popcorn stuff.
Yeah. And it does, yeah, it doesn't have to be all bing boom bam. And when it does have bing boom bam, it's has something behind it, you know, like in which is what I think this stands out for, is that at least it sets the stage for what's the big action sequences later and does such a great job at that. So that's why I think it stands strong as a part 1 by itself, but we'll see if it even gets better with part 2. But guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for 100 episodes. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting.
Thanks for the support. We were initially planning on doing something a little more outside of the box for 100th episode, but we've been so busy that we couldn't really get it out on time. But look forward to something a little different that we're working on soon.
Yeah, we're working on something special. We will not let it go just yet, but we are working on something big, and I think you guys will really enjoy it because you listen to the Warp Shelf because you like narrative stories, you know, and we want to maybe give you guys some of that. So we'll see what you'll see. But basically, we're working on something narrative. That's basically the one clue I can give you guys. But thank you guys for supporting the show. Like I said, for HBO Max and for Netflix, just throw a view on this. Like if you see a new episode of the Warp Shelf up on and you can't watch it right away, just play it and then come back to it. Like just get that
Give
view
us the number.
on it.
Feed the beast, like we always say.
Feed the beast. Make the algorithm move, because we're not gonna be. I hate the comment, like, and subscribe before a video starts. We're never gonna fucking do that. We're only gonna do ads like this at the end. Guys, check out galaxygeek.com for everything the Warp Shelf. You guys can see every one of our episodes, but also many other articles on there. And be sure.
I would like to go back to like the earliest episodes just to see how like rusty we were finally coming back to podcasting.
I was listening to a couple of them. I went back and I was like, how rough were we? And they rough. They a little bit rough. They're a little bit rough. But I feel like we've gotten so much better, and I think that with the next 100 episodes, I think we want to. I think we want to give you guys again more weekly podcast, more in-depth deep dives on things, so that way you guys feel like. I want you guys to come into these episodes and feel like you not only learn something, but you get why we feel like this about those things. You want to really. And then you can maybe go into the next movie and get why we would like, why somebody would like that type of thing. And we want to just, it's about the appreciation of film, if you didn't understand, or video games or anything else.
Or just storytelling.
Storytelling in general. Yeah, fucking storytelling in general. So, guys, I think that in the next 100 episodes, we'll have some guests on, because obviously we can do these remote episodes. We can have a guest on this bitch if we wanted to. Yeah. And of course we have that little tease of the narrative work that's happening. And basically, guys, we're gonna keep giving it to you. We're gonna keep happening. It's basically a whole nother year of the Warp Shelf is ready, rearing to go. Guys, please, thank you for the support, and please check us out on our own personal social medias so you can see things that are happening, things we've gotten. It's cool stuff, basically. You could check out Deshaun as
Mod Karaika. I actually just came back from Rhode Island Comic Con, so I have a bunch of pictures up for that.
And then Yupfrank, and I got a bunch of stuff this past week, so I've been posting on there about that. But you can also check out our Discord if you're down for that. It's in the YouTube channel description. But we also got Facebook, and we got our own personal Twitters. But basically, thank you guys. Thank you for 100 episodes.
And we'll see you for 2.
We'll see you for 200, right? We'll see you for 200, and maybe we'll be talking about Dune Part 2 then. No, I'm just kidding. Hopefully it'll be out before that. Oh, Jesus Christ.
I don't think it's going to be. I think they said the earliest we'll get it maybe like 2023.
Oh, so maybe it'll be after that. We'll be talking Part 2. But, guys, thank you so much. Thank you for 100 episodes, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
See you next time.